Hey guys, Lauren here, your friendly neighborhood art teacher with nobody to teach right now. So today I'm going to teach you how to make my little fluffy boy clouds, and you can choose to use oil like I do, or you can use acrylic, whatever tickles your fancy, and I hope you like it. Here we go. Alrighty, let's start by talking about materials. So what I have is a little tiny canvas. So one of the things that I don't like about canvas is their texture. It sort of picks up all those crisscross hatchings. So here's one way to get rid of that. You get a piece of sandpaper and you're gonna sand. To make it a little bit smoother than it is. There we go. Then you're gonna wipe off any excess dust, and then you use one of my favorite priming materials, which is gloss, medium, and varnish. Really good for priming wood if you're gonna paint on wood. It's also good for softening the texture on these canvas things, because I really just don't like that crisscross action. So I'm gonna take one of my brushes and I'm just gonna spread that all around. Now see how you have these bumps right here? You want to get rid of those bumps. So flatten. You can wipe off some of my excess on my palette right here. That way I have a nice smooth surface to work with. Now those will take about 5 minutes to dry. So while that's drying, I'll go over our other supplies. I'm gonna set that aside to dry. Alrighty, so let's start over here. So I'm working with oil paint. So here's my oil paint right here. Now if you work with oil paint, you have to have paint thinner. This is some of my reusable paint thinner. The good thing about paint thinner is you can use it over and over and over again, but you have to have some nearby. You can't paint oil paint without paint thinner. The oil paint that I choose is actually super duper cheap. It's Artist Loft oil paint. You can get this set in a set of 24 for about, I think like $12.99 from Michael's. It's very, very cheap. The colors that I used for my clouds are yellow, portrait pink, which is like a peach, crimson, and you can use really any kind of red, cerulean blue for the sky. You see this one I use all the time. It has sort of a grayish muted tone for the sky, and then violet. And I use a ton of white, and this is actually a friend of mine, Benji's white, that I've reused, and I use tons and tons of white, so I have this huge Utrecht Studio Series white oil because I use this one more often than anything. Now the brushes that I like to use are these rounded flat brushes. So if you look on this side, see how it's really slim on the side and it's flat, but the top of it is rounded. This is really good for fluffing the edges of your clouds and making organic shapes. If you have some of these flat square ones, these are probably your next best bet, but you'll still see like it's a very choppy, inorganic brush stroke. So what you can do is take a pair of scissors. Here go some of my manicuring scissors, and you can chop off some of the edge so it's a little bit more round and therefore a little bit more organic. There we go. Flip it over. So if you're operating on a budget and you want a rounded brush but you don't have one, this is sort of my organic way to go, is just snipping it out so it's rounded. But the brushes that I like to use are these rounded flat brushes. Alrighty, let's talk about cloud shapes. So what we're working on with clouds, we want to make sure when we're making it fluffy that it looks natural, that it looks organic, like it's being formed from nature as opposed to being formed from our hands. So on my sheet right here are very common shapes of clouds, and all of them are incorrect. If you look at this cloud right here, see how it's like rounded all the way around and fluffy? That's not how we actually see clouds. Clouds are actually flat on the bottom because it's curving over the Earth's surface and we're seeing it stretch back into space. So we're not going to see fluffiness on the bottom right here. Now these two are incorrect because the fluffs on top are all too similar. If you look on the bottom, I have these super tiny fluffs. It looks very like inaccurate, unreal, and this one, they're all too similar. What you have to do is mix between small and little. So usually flat on the bottom and then some big and a little one like that. This would be a good fluffy cloud, and then give it like a fluff master back here. And so this would be a really good cloud shape. You want to do it organically. You want it to look less created and more like it's formed out in nature. Alrighty, this is about almost dry, so I'm going to place this right here. While it's still getting close to drying, I'm going to start preparing my color palette. So I'm going to start with white because that's the one I'm going to use a bunch of. And that's the only one I'm going to use a big dot like that. White I use for all aspects, so I use a big drop of white. For all the other ones, you can use very small amounts. Like, see how tiny that is? Super duper tiny for my yellow. You only want a drop of it when you're highlighting your cloud. Then my portrait pink right here. And again, not a huge, super big amount. Then I'm going to get my crimson. And I'm gonna put violet next because I'm gonna use my brushes are getting in the way. Use my violet, small amounts. And I'll get my blue ready. I'm gonna put my blue further away because my blue I'm using for the background. Dun, 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 dun. Alrighty. So now I have my color palette ready. This is about dry. What I'm gonna do is I'm going to outline my cloud on my canvas so you guys can sort of see what it is I'm working with. But when I actually paint clouds, I don't do that. I sort of let it free form itself, but so you guys can sort of see the overall shape that I'm talking about, and so I can talk about value, I'm going to do a very light outline. So there we go, there's my fluffy cloud that I'm gonna use. Alrighty, this one I'm going to decide to put a sun over here, so here's where my sun is going to be. Now, your light source is super important. So if this is my sun, that means this part of my cloud is going to be very light, and this part of my cloud is going to be very dark. So if I were to map out my shadows, you want to think of each little bubble having its shadow. So here's gonna go my shadows right here. Da, 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 da. So right in here is where my purples are gonna go. Then I'm gonna transition to my pink and then on over to my peach if my sun's gonna go over here. Now you can start, when you start painting, you can start doing the light side, you can start doing the dark side, whatever tickles your fancy. I usually tend to start light, but that's a little bit hard to see the contrast with white on white, so I'm going to start with the shadow. So I'm going to start with one of my flat rounded brushes, and I'm going to mix up a light purple. Let's see. So I add some purple, then I'm going to get some white in it. I don't want it to be too strong. Remember, these are supposed to be soft, fluffy boys. And I'm going to grab a little bit of this crimson. That sort of softens my purple a little bit, makes it a little bit warmer. There we go. Now I'm going to start over here. And it's okay if your edges are not super clean, like you'll see that my edges are kind of messy right now. That's okay, I can go back and clean that up when I do my blue background later. And I know you guys can still see a little bit of my black outlines. It's not super pretty for this particular cloud. Thank you, Maybe, my dog. but I'm leaving the black in there just so you guys can see the form. I don't usually paint by putting black lines on my canvas. Alrighty, now my next step is to add a little bit of pink to it. So I'm starting to transition over here towards the light. Let me just bring in a little bit more purple in there to fluff it up. Alrighty, now what I can do is keep using the same brush, but I don't have to mix it up into the paint thinner yet. I really only mix it in the paint thinner when I'm totally done painting. What I like to do is sort of allow the colors to transition themselves. So what I do is I wipe off sort of the excess paint, and I can pick up some of this pink over here, grab some of this purpley white, and that way it's not a super huge transition between the two. I don't want it to be too jarring. That way it looks like they're flowing into one another, as opposed to, you know, my neighborhood is super, super loud, y'all. I don't want it to look like I've mixed up too many random colors. That's why I prefer to use the same brush and work within the color family. So I'm painting a lot of the bottom here, because if the sun's over here, the opposite side of this cloud is going to be a lot darker. Add a little bit more crimson too here, so it's a little bit pinkier. Little boy up here. Okay. Now because I'm going to start going towards the light, I'm going to put this brush down. I'm going to pick up another brush. Alrighty, I'm going to start going towards my peachy pinks. So I'm going to pick up some more of this crimson. I'm going to grab some of this peach over here and mix up my little peachy pink. Soften it up with a little bit of white. There we go. Alright, fluffy boy time. What I want to make sure that you do is paint on top of your layers. See how I'm going like right on top of that magenta tone right there? It'll mix and blend and be more natural than if I were to say, see right here, there's a space between the two. If I go right on top with fairly light strokes, it'll blend it for me. Alrighty. Next one is I'm going to keep this same brush. I'm going to wipe off any excess paint. Grab some of this peach. Grab some of this yellow, not a whole bunch, and then a ton of this white. This is where like my highlight is going to go. I'm going to grab a little bit more yellow. So this is what's going to be closest to the sun right here. Here's my light peachy boy. And notice I'm making little swirling motions to make it a little fluffy. Okay, so there's my cloud. Now, what I'm going to go back and do is add a little bit more of my peaches pink tones in here to make it a little bit fluffier. So I'm going to wipe off that excess, pick up some of my crimson again. I don't want to go over an area too many times in oil, because then what starts to happen is it gets a little muddy. So I don't want to overdo it per se when I'm going back in there. Okay. Now, before I do my signature dry brush blending, I gotta do my background first because I'm gonna dry brush blend that as well. So now it's time for my blue. So I'm gonna grab another one of my flat round brushes, and I'm gonna get some of my cerulean blue. I'm gonna get some of this white, and I wanna kind of pick up some of those other colors in there too. So if I were to use this straight white blue right here, it's too bright, too not natural. So I wanna add some purple to it to sort of cool it down and calm it down, and add some more of this dirty white in there. A little purple to calm it down, a little white to brighten it up. And now I can just go in, clean up some of these edges. I'm going to turn mine to the side so I can get a little bit better access in here. Now you don't want the bottom to be super straight across because again that's not very natural, so I want it to be a little bit bumpy on the bottom, just not very much so. Get in here a little bit. I wanted to paint outside today, one because it is lovely weather outside, and two because the lighting is so much better outside, especially for filming. Okay. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually mix up a darker color for the bottom. I'm going to add a lot more purple to it. A little bit of this crimson, a little bit more of the blue so it's darker over here towards the bottom. You don't want to really paint it all one color because then you lose a lot of the interest from the background. And again, notice how I just used the same brush. I didn't wash it off between colors because I want the colors themselves to flow naturally into one another, be part of the same family, look like they're related. And these brushes I'm using actually were about, I think the whole set itself was maybe $5, ordered from School Specialty. So you don't have to use expensive materials. The majority of my materials are actually very, very cheap. It's just about how you use it. All right, now I'm gonna mix up a lighter version here. I'm gonna add a lot of this white for here towards the top. And again, I want it to be slightly different colors to add interest. I don't want it to be all the same. Alright, here's my sun right here, and I don't want to go all the way up to the sun's edge. I want to give the sun a little bit of a glow. Let me call that spot right there. So I'm going to mix up a lot of white in a new spot, grab a little bit of this yellow, which I know turns a green, but we want it to look like the sun is shining on the sky in the background. So the blue should be a little bit warmer. A little bit brighter. I'm going to add a ton more white actually. There we go. That way when I add my sun on there, it looks like it's glowing. Blend it out. Okay, time for my sun. I'm going to use this, Ah, the struggle is real, you guys. Go over there. All of you. Okay. I swear. Dullorn. Alrighty. I'm gonna grab a little bit of my yellow, a little bit of my peach. I want it to be a nice, warm, sunny sun. Here goes my sun. And again, on mine you see these black outlines. I don't typically paint with the black outlines. I just wanted you to see how I map things out. Alrighty, we are not done right here. The last step is coming to make it nice and fluffy. Alrighty, the last step in fluffing out those clouds comes from a brush like this. It's a big, fluffy, round brush, long bristles, super duper dry, no paint on it, very soft to the touch. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna very softly swirl my brush around here to soften the edges of the paint and make it look fluffy. What I don't want to do is take my brush and go all the way across to fluff it. What that does is drags this paint all the way through my light fluffy areas. So I start with the light areas and then I work my way out in very small, very light motions. It's a super duper light touch. So I'm going to start with my lighter area and just very light circular taps. And see how it sort of starts to eliminate those painting strokes? Gives it a little bit of a softer edge. Get in here before I get my brush dirty. And then I work my way out to like the pinkish areas. And then all the way out to the purple. Fluffing out the edges of the clouds, especially on the shadow end, to make it look like they're blending into space. And this guy back here. Now I don't just use the dry brush on my clouds themselves, I also use it on the background because it does get rid of those brush strokes and makes it look more solid and uniform. So I lightly tap in the background as well. To get rid of obvious brush strokes, but also smooth and blend so that the transitions of my colors are a little bit more natural. Alrighty. There we go. And there goes my fluffy cloud. Now you can still see some of these black outlines on there. Again, I don't typically paint with black outlines. I just wanted to see or show you guys how I sort of form my shapes. You want it to be organic. So here goes this cloud over here and this cloud. If you enjoyed this video, let me know. Send me a like, send me a comment, show me things that you're painting. Wish me luck that I don't get run over in my front yard. And I hope you like this little painting. What I usually like to paint on is wood, but I'm actually out of these wood rounds in quarantine. I can't get any more for a while, so it looks like canvas it is, or maybe cell phone cases. Alrighty, bye-bye now, see y'all later.